This is The Efficiency Point, a podcast from Modern Pumping Today magazine. I'm MPT editor Jay Campbell, along with our producer Richard Council. You can find us online at mptmag.com, and please rate, review, and subscribe to the show on any of your favorite podcast apps. On today's episode, we speak with Brian Strait, Check All Valves Business Development and Marketing Manager, about the value of proper valve sizing and how to stave off the damage of water hammer. We also look through the latest issue of MPT and take a trip into the MPT archives to find a special connection that we have to the Super Bowl. But first, let's fire up some headlines. The call for abstracts is now open for the Behavior, Energy, and Climate Change Conference. The deadline for abstracts is April the 1st, and they should be 300 words in length. This year's theme of the conference is From Nudge to Leap. BECC brings together social science researchers and actors in business, government, and nonprofit to discuss methods for taking action on climate change. This year's conference will be at the end of the year, December 6th through 9th in Washington, D.C. If you're interested in participating in the 2020 conference, then BECC invites you to present your work and learn from others on how to encourage behavior change for energy and carbon reduction, evaluate such programs, and understand why individuals and groups change. Finding ways to make these transitions fair and equitable is the focus of the BECC. Researchers, academics, businesses, utilities, governments, and nonprofits come together to learn and network at this very unique conference. Format options for the presentations are individual presentations, either poster or oral, and also panel or symposium topics. BECC will be accepting abstracts on 8 distinct issues, and you can find them outlined on the conference website, becconference.org. We'll also include a link in the show notes for this episode. A recent report published by Fiora Markets shows that the global industrial valves market is expected to grow from its current estimate of $70 billion worldwide to over $93 billion by the year 2026. The growing demand for flow control equipment is expected to fuel market growth in the next 6 years. Some of the key findings in the global industrial valve market include factors such as an immense rise in the demand for power in developing regions of the world as they replace manual valves with smart valves, a process-oriented manufacturing unit striving to continuously increase their operating efficiencies, resulting in an increase in the demand of industrial valves. Factors such as increasing smart city projects, industrialization and urbanization in areas throughout India and China where there is population growth, and an expansion in the market due to new product releases from legacy companies based in the North American and Euro sectors. Industrial valves are built to handle high pressure or fluid or gas and to last years in harsh environments. Most utilities, from water to oil and gas, have a high requirement of heavy-duty industrial strength valves. We'll talk a bit more about the role valves play in these operations later in the show with Check All Valve Manufacturing's Brian Strait. If you want to browse the full report along with its table of contents, we'll include a link to that in the show notes. If you're listening to this podcast in Texas or anywhere around that area, then the Hydraulic Institute has a pair of training opportunities for you beginning the week of March 20th. First, HI teams up with Texas A&M Turbo Machinery Lab to present a course in Houston, Centrifugal Compressor Operations for the 21st Century Users, or CCOPS. That's a mouthful. The 3-day course is worth 2.6 CEUs or 26 professional development hours, and is suited for both entry-level and more experienced compressor professionals. Entry-level folks will accelerate their understanding of the technology and how it's used in oil and gas applications, as one would expect in a Houston-based symposium. And experienced professionals will enhance their knowledge of current technologies with methods enabling a more effective project performance and their maintenance strategies. All participants will add to a network of industry professionals and be able to share some of their ideas and experience and also ask questions. Later that same week, on March 24th through the 26th in San Antonio, HI will be offering its first PSAP preparation course and exam of the year. Energy efficiency and system optimization is the leading current and is one of the leading currents in the pump industry. So there's a growing need for pump system professionals with the knowledge and experience to perform high quality assessments to benchmark current systems and recommend system upgrades. We'll post links for more information about both of these courses in the show notes. Check All Valve Manufacturing Company has been producing inline spring-loaded check valves that serve a wide range of industries and practically every service application. Brian Strait is Check All Valve's Business Development and Marketing Manager, and we're pleased to have him join us today. How are you doing there, Brian?
I'm doing great. How are you?
Doing great, and thank you for taking time to talk with us.
You're welcome.
I guess since I have you on the line, and if I have anybody from a valve manufacturing company on the line, probably the first thing our listeners would be interested into is the idea of valve sizing and how important is correct valve sizing for a piping application?
Well, valve sizing is very important when it comes to having a valve that works properly for a long period of time. Oftentimes, there are applications where maybe a valve is improperly sized and then you have downtime paying mechanics to come and fix the problem, plumbing people, things like that.
So what can be some of the consequences if valves are oversized for the operating conditions?
If valves are oversized, they can have their check mechanism do what they call rattle or chatter. When the check mechanism rattles or chatters, it first of all creates a noise, a rattling sound,
right.
But it also can wear out the check mechanism as a whole, so it can cause premature valve failure, which in turn requires valve replacement.
So this is a cascading problem in the entire system.
Yes.
And does that differ from if valves are undersized? How does that affect the system?
Undersizing is different for sure. When you undersize a valve, the valve will fully open, but it might do what they call choke the flow, meaning flow coming into the valve opens, but it doesn't allow enough flow to go downstream. That creates a pressure back upstream, which can cause other issues like pumps not working properly or things like that.
So you get a backflow problem going into the pump, and that affects the seals, that affects the flow meters, that affects pretty much the whole system, right?
It can, yes.
So now that we've got the oversized and undersized kind of laid out, what would, as a manufacturer, how would Check All advise people to, what are some of the main things you would advise them for ensuring that they get an accurate size on their valves?
Well, sizing on check valves is a bit different than sizing on, let's say, control valves or actuated valves. Control valves, actuated valves, they have a mechanism that operates the checking part through either hydraulics, electronics, or maybe a lever or a handle. So they can make that check mechanism open and close to a certain point manually or, like say, through some other variable. Spring-loaded check valves, on the other hand, or valves like we manufacture, require the media to open and close the valve. So having proper spring selection is actually as important or even more important than the actual size of the valve, although they still call that valve sizing.
So the valve itself is doing the work that an operator in the plant would be doing otherwise.
Well, the spring that's in the valve is, yes.
Right. Well, and correct me if I'm wrong, but Check All Valve, you're specializing in check valves. I mean, that's your entire product line, right?
We actually specialize in spring-loaded poppet-style check valves, and that is our entire line, very focused product line.
So if a customer needed to find reference help in terms of finding the proper sizing, Check All would be the place to go.
That's correct. We offer the widest range of spring settings, or what the industry knows as spring cracking pressures, that's available in the industry. We literally offer thousands of different settings.
And how would I be able to choose between those different settings to find the right one for me? Is there a reference that Check All provides, or do you have a hotline?
Check All provides technical support. We have several qualified technical people as well as degreed engineers here that can work with the customer, get the application information that is necessary to determine flows and pressures and media that's going through the valve, and then they can do a calculation that confirms what kind of spring setting might be needed to assure that the valve opens fully and closes fully, which is what you want to have a check valve to do to have the longest life out of a valve.
So I suppose with the level of specialization that you guys provide, there haven't been too many problems you haven't been able to solve for customers, have there?
That's correct. We have a return rate, or what I'll say, warranty claims, that are less than 0.5% of all valves shipped.
That's amazing.
Of those warranty claims, only about half of them are actual warranties.
Wow. So, so the other half are probably missizings or somebody that runs into a problem media, something like that?
That's exactly right. Oftentimes, when we get that information, we can go back to the customer, we can gather the application information, advise the customer as to why we feel this valve didn't perform like you'd want it to. Then we would suggest they maybe change the spring or the seat or what have you to make sure that the valve performs properly. And that's when we solve their problem and we make the customer happy.
So when a check valve is properly sized, put into the application, and is running as everything should, it should have a pretty long life cycle, shouldn't it?
Yes, there are variables when it comes to life cycle that are outside of the sizing, such as corrosion resistance and things like that. But removing those variables, it's not unheard of to get many, many years of life out of a properly sized spring-loaded check valve, and upwards of 1 million+ cycles of a valve opening and closing and still performing.
I imagine that's why they're so popular, because when I talk to people, that are pump manufacturers or people that are operating in different treatment plants or processing facilities, the main thing they're always looking for is higher efficiency and longer life cycle.
That's correct. Oftentimes, check valves aren't even thought of until they break down, and that's when a customer needs them, and they need them real quick. And when they break down multiple times, that's when they really decide that maybe they need a valve that is more suited specifically towards their application rather than, say, a general check valve that you can get in a plumbing store, which those valves are perfectly fine for certain applications. Where we shine is when those applications where those valves don't work like needed.
I guess it's kind of like referees in a football game. You don't notice them until they make a bad call.
That's right.
Well, one of the issues that check valves do encounter, though, that I hear from people, is about water hammer. That's probably the most common problem that people associate when they think of check valves. What causes water hammer, and how does it affect the entire piping system?
Well, water hammer is caused by a liquid, such as water, that is suddenly stopped or goes in reverse flow, and that creates what they call a hydraulic shock or a noise. So when that shock happens and the flow stops or reverses, it reverberates up the system and can literally shake system components apart, cause leaks, destroy equipment. It can get really bad depending on how bad the shock is.
Yeah, I mean, we call it water hammer, but I guess it really could happen in any kind of thin media, couldn't it?
Yeah, it normally happens in a liquid type of media.
Yeah. So what when you talk about hydraulic shock and these shock waves that go up and down, what kind of damage could that do to down-the-line components like flow meters or pressure sensors?
It can do all kinds of damage. I've talked to customers that have experienced water hammer, and they have literally said it can move buildings off foundations. Now, I don't know if I completely believe that, but I think that's kind of a fairly humorous description of what they can do. What it can do, it can really destroy equipment.
Oh, I believe you. I mean, I've talked to people that have seen pumps pushed off of base plates.
Yes.
Because of water hammer. And when you think about how big some of those machines are, how solidly they're bolted down to these base plates, that are then bolted down to a work floor, that's a lot of force.
Yes, and it's amazing what it can do.
So knowing that the danger is out there, how would you recommend some of the key steps that we prevent water hammer from taking hold?
Well, the main step is utilizing a spring-loaded check valve. Spring-loaded check valves close before reverse flow begins. They have that unique aspect to them. So they operate off a pressure differential. So while the media is coming through the valve, it hits the valve, it gives pressure and flow and compresses that spring. So when the pump's running, that valve opens up and allows flow to go one way. Say the pump before the valve shuts down, well, then that pressure starts to diminish and that flow starts to diminish. Once it gets to a certain point, that valve will close, but it'll happen before pressure is gone and before reverse flow begins, eliminating the effects of water hammer.
So I guess it all ties back into what we were saying earlier about proper sizing, doesn't it?
It does. Proper sizing also can help with that. If you have an oversized valve and it happens to be opening and closing a bunch, it can create some issues. But normally it happens when the system shuts down and flow stops, and it stops before reverse flow begins, or it stops and then reverse flow happens.
Right.
And if you have an oversized valve that, say, locks open because it's prematurely worn, then it can't prevent that reverse flow, and water hammer can happen.
So they're the warning signs.
Yes.
Well, Brian, thank you so much for taking some time to talk with us today. How can people find Check All Valve online?
You can go to www.checkall, that's all one word, .com.
Well, Brian, thank you again for taking time to talk to us. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
If you're a subscriber to MPT, then the January issue is already in your hands. In this issue's Water and Wastewater Solutions section, check out a contribution from RP Adams Inc. highlighting how a growing number of municipalities are ensuring superior water quality as well as membrane longevity, utilizing low-maintenance, self-cleaning, pre-treatment filters. Also, Cobalt Instruments Inc. shares a look at the company's unique flow meter that combines IO-Link with remote version design. We always like to put a spotlight on new products in the magazine, and this one will be of special interest anywhere accurate flow measurement is a key component to your system running smoothly, whether it be in the pharmaceutical industry, water treatment, or in food production. And longtime subscribers might recognize that MPT has a rooting interest in this weekend's Super Bowl between Kansas City and San Francisco. Richard, did you know that as a news program, we are not bound by those trademark restrictions and whether or not we're allowed to say Super Bowl?
I actually didn't know that at all.
Now, well, it depends on you, since you're the one who posts the episodes on the website. Just make certain not to call this our Super Bowl episode. That would be a violation.
Well, as long as I use the trademark, though, right? We should be okay. No, that's right, because ABC, was it still ABC?
That's right. We would have to call it something like the Big Game episode or some nonsense like that.
What if I wonder if I can hashtag it.
I don't know. No, anything that uses Super Bowl for, see, we can talk about the Super Bowl and we can say the Super Bowl by name, but we cannot affiliate ourselves with the Super Bowl. Right now, we're just talking about it.
Right.
So I can't say that this is the Super Bowl edition of the podcast. That would be wrong.
That would be
NFL
wrong.
Lawyers, please recognize that is not what I'm doing.
Nope. We just
Listeners, please do not confuse.
We are just simply expressing our love for the Super Bowl.
Well, actually, I am expressing, as much as we do love the Super Bowl, it's America's, unofficial, second Christmas. MPT has a connection to this year's Super Bowl thanks to the San Francisco 49ers. Do you know what that is, Richard?
I don't.
A few years ago, Levi Stadium, home of the 49ers, was the subject of a cover story by Mark Hansel of Xylem's Bell and Gossett. So we'll link to that part of the MPT archive so people can read that case study about taking a up-close look at the stadium's recycled water pressure booster system. So I guess, I think the betting line right now, again, this is just for entertainment purposes. Do not take MPT's wagering for any monetary guarantees. I believe the betting line right now is Kansas City is favored by 1 point. Is that right?
Honestly, I have zero clue because I like football, but at this point, after I saw it is Kansas City and the 49ers, I was actually pretty surprised that's the Super Bowl this year. I don't think I've ever seen It's all, because as long as I've been alive, it's always been, like the Cowboys and,
the Patriots.
The Patriots.
Yeah.
Actually, it's probably been the Patriots almost as long as I've been alive. And so it was just an odd matchup. And so I really haven't been paying too close attention to it. Plus, I'm more of a college football fan anyways.
Well, so am I.
Yeah. But if anything, I like the Saints, just because my family lives in Louisiana anyways. But for the most part, the most I have information I've gathered from any kind of wagering during the Super Bowl is, are you familiar with Rocket Mortgage Squares?
I'm not.
Okay.
Is that like their Super Bowl advertising this year?
And I'm telling you, I can't even get gas without it blaring on the Shell station. It's just all the time. Rocket Mortgage Squares, $50,000. Anyway, but that's about all I got.
Yeah, this episode is also not brought to you by Rocket Mortgage.
It is not, or Shell.
Well, also, Richard, you're not following the gambling because you're not a degenerate. So thank you. But if you are a degenerate, like people in the studio who will remain nameless, and since there's only two of us, I believe that Kansas City is a 1-point favorite.
Okay.
I think a lot of the early money is coming in on them for whatever that's worth. But MPT, our heart is with the 49ers.
That's right.
Until Kansas City does, a pump upgrade at their stadium, then, we'll switch allegiances.
Yeah.
You show up in the magazine, we'll root for you. So look for that. Look, if you're a current subscriber, you'll already have that in your inbox. But if not, there's still time to sign up for a free 12-month subscription by visiting mptmag.com and clicking on that subscribe tab. This has been The Efficiency Point, a podcast from MPT Magazine. Follow us on Twitter at ModPumpMag for updates on our next episode. Today's episode was produced by Richard Council. Until next time, I'm your host, Jay Campbell. Thank you for listening.